Hey folks, if you want to stay updated with the latest news and in-depth analysis, make sure to follow S News to catch this and all our future videos. We really appreciate your support, so don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and drop a comment below. Your feedback helps us bring you more of the stories that matter. Thanks for tuning in, and remember to stick with S News for all your news needs. Iran's Sejjil missiles aid Russia, while Putin rages over strikes on US and NATO bases in Ukraine. The weather and the political climate keeps getting hotter by the day. That's exactly the situation between Russia and Ukraine right now. Things really started heating up when former US President Donald Trump seemed to give Ukraine the capability to strike Russia using advanced missile systems. This move sparked anger from Vladimir Putin, who expressed frustration, saying the European Union had essentially funded Ukraine's destruction by footing the bill for weapons sent to Kyiv. But it's not just Putin who's furious. His allies, like China, North Korea and Iran, are also fuming. In fact, according to several reports, Iran is ready to send its powerful Sejjil missile, the same one that once devastated Tel Aviv, to support Russia. So what happens next? And what would it mean if the US got directly involved in the Russia-Ukraine standoff? Tensions spiked again between Russia and NATO after Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov confirmed that Russia's nuclear doctrine remains fully in effect. This came right after Trump announced the delivery of advanced weapons to Ukraine. Peskov made the statement during a press conference on Wednesday, July 16, 2025, just 2 days after Trump revealed that the US and its NATO allies would send billions of dollars worth of military equipment to Ukraine, including Patriot missiles. This triggered a sharp response from Moscow, which has long accused the West of escalating the conflict. Speaking to reporters at the state-run TASS news agency, Peskov reiterated that all clauses of Russia's nuclear doctrine are still active. He pointed to the nuclear policy updated by President Putin in December 2024, which lowered the threshold for using nuclear weapons. According to that doctrine, any attack on Russia or its allies by a non-nuclear country, if supported by a nuclear power, will be seen as a joint aggression that could be met with nuclear retaliation. In this context, direct military support from NATO countries, especially the US, might qualify as such aggression under Russia's interpretation. Meanwhile, NATO leaders, led by Trump, agreed some time ago to allocate 5% of their country's GDP toward defense spending every year until 2035. Spain was the only country to object, but the majority supported the move. Trump called it a major victory for NATO and himself, arguing that increased military budgets would strengthen NATO's capabilities, especially in countering Russia. Russia, viewing NATO as a genuine threat, has long opposed its expansion, particularly into Eastern Europe and Ukraine, which Moscow sees as a critical part of its sphere of influence. So when Moscow saw NATO's summit as a sign of growing strength, it responded swiftly. Putin declared his intention to take full control of Ukraine. After learning of NATO's massive aid plans for Ukraine, Putin launched a major assault on Ukrainian territory. Russia deployed an additional 110,000 troops to reinforce its ground forces across various regions of Ukraine, the goal to seize more territory and create the psychological impression of victory. But Russia didn't stop there. It also launched its biggest airstrike campaign since the invasion began. Over 530 aerial weapons were used, including 477 drones and decoys, and 60 missiles, hitting areas far from the front lines. The result? Parts of Ukraine were turned into hell on earth by Russian firepower. This is what pushed Trump to step in and issue direct threats to Putin, warning of potential military action within the next 50 days. But interestingly, Putin wasn't intimidated. Instead, he challenged the US to go ahead and get involved in Ukraine. Russia claims that Western countries are headed for collapse. After seeing NATO pledge a massive defense budget for Ukraine, Moscow declared the 5% GDP target a reckless move. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warned that this spending surge might actually destroy NATO, describing the scenario as a financial disaster for member states. He insisted that NATO's plan wouldn't significantly impact Russia's security. Ironically, while NATO is ramping up its defense spending, Moscow plans to cut its military budget next year. Dmitry Peskov accused NATO of deliberately portraying Russia as a major threat to justify military build-up and increase defense spending. He described NATO as an inherently confrontational organization. According to Peskov, NATO uses the Russia threat narrative to pressure its members into spending more on their militaries, something Russia claims is putting a huge burden on European citizens. Meanwhile, President Putin slammed NATO's decision to raise its defense budget, calling it irrational and driven by the American arms industry. He insisted that Russia would not lose to this effort, claiming the country is economically and militarily strong enough to stand up to NATO, even with the increased spending. Putin also pointed out what's happening in the West, saying they keep trying to bury Russia, but they'll end up digging their own graves. He noted that Russia's GDP grew by 4.3% last year, following a 4.1% increase the year before. In contrast, he said Europe hasn't seen any real economic growth and has remained stagnant for the past few years. Putin argued that Europe would struggle to afford a 5% increase in its defense budget, claiming such spending would bury the continent. He even referenced the Spanish Prime Minister, who said it was unreasonable to commit to that kind of increase. As it stands, neither Zelensky nor Putin is showing any willingness to negotiate. Just a few days ago, Putin warned that the situation in Ukraine would only get worse. Russian forces recently captured the village of Lohin after pushing Ukrainian troops, referred to as Kiev forces, out of the last positions there. At the same time, Iran has made it clear it's ready to back Russia with missile support. Iran's Sejjil missiles are reportedly prepped and ready. The Sejjil missile, which Iran fired at Israeli territory during their most recent conflict, has become one of Tehran's key strategic weapons. It runs on solid fuel, making it more advanced than older liquid-fueled models like the Shahab 3. Since its first test in November 2008, and after further development into the Sejjil 2 model in 2009, the missile has shown impressive range and maneuverability. Solid fuel offers two major advantages: faster launch time and greater mobility. Since it doesn't require a long fueling process, the missile can be launched quickly. Its mobile launch platform also makes it harder to detect and destroy before takeoff. Iran saw Trump's decision to send Patriot missiles to Ukraine as a direct threat and decided it wouldn't sit back. Iran now appears ready to support Russia by sending some of its most advanced missiles, starting with the Sejjil 1 and 2, along with the Fateh 1 and 2. Tehran demonstrated the power of its missile program during its recent 12-day conflict with Israel, where parts of Israeli territory were heavily damaged. Regardless of the details, the main point is this: Russia and its allies won't stay silent if the US continues to help Ukraine strike at them. Nations aligned with Russia like China, North Korea and Iran are prepared to send weapons and even troops to support Moscow on the battlefield. At this point, all eyes are on Donald Trump. Will he find a way to de-escalate the crisis, or will things spiral even further out of control? Finally, thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed this video, please consider following S News and watching our future videos. Don't forget to subscribe, like and comment. We really appreciate